Hi, welcome to my studio. I'm Andrej Kobal, a Slovenian composer, sound designer and improvisator, and I do quite a lot of patching in Max MSP. In Max I also build solutions for sound installations, for theaters and for other composers. In Max I have also developed some instruments and tools that I use in my studio and that I also use in a live performance. Together with Boštjan Pirnat, we have developed some commercially available Max for Live devices. One is called Granularize, which offers a unique take on the granular synthesis, and another is a non-linear sequencer called Sequemperor. Today I would like mostly to present you the Granularize project, but if there will be time I will also include some examples from Sequemperor. So, let's dive in. So I would like to first introduce you on why I started to build Granularize. As we all know, as electronic musicians, we are constantly searching for our own sound. It's like an instrumentalist develop his own techniques and like a singer develop his own voice. So I started to build Granularize for myself so that I can explore and develop my own sounds and my own musical idea. An important aspect for me was also that it can be quite easily used in the studio, for example, for sound designs, and at the same time can work well in a live environment or in a sound installation. I think over the years we all try different virtual instruments and different software and different virtual music environments. But over the years I felt that they push me to a certain result and they tend to give me some directions that maybe are not mine, but they are predefined by the developers or by the companies that make these virtual instruments. So I wanted to build some sounds that are really mine and unique. And obviously Max is perfect for this, and so I started to develop the basic concepts of Granularize in Max. The main advantage of Max is obviously that you start from scratch if you want to, so you can really dive deep and then, develop your own instruments and effects and stuff. So I think this is really important because that gives you the freedom that you are not limited by pre-made things, but you construct your own instruments and sound environments. And over the year, when you develop all of this, you have like your little blocks that you can reuse. And as you will see, there are quite some concepts that are used in Granularize and then developed to a new certain level and used also in Sequemperor. Let's now open Granularize and see what it's all about. So the most essential and most basic idea was to record something into it, because I couldn't find any samplers that let you record your buffers or waveforms and immediately transform it. Obviously this is for a reason, because normally samplers have more waveforms recorded to build the whole sound. My main idea was not to imitate the real instruments, but to just record some sounds and immediately go to the transformation of it. And so I have here a little reds button and a volume in, which can immediately record my voice, and so I can immediately transform it. So this is just like the basic idea. Now I won't do the recording of my voice, but I will just drag and drop a sample. So we can also have predefined samples. I have just taken a simple sample and drop it in. So I can immediately see the waveform. And if we listen to the sample, it's just a recorded piano with my breathing. So let's listen to the sample, which is really basic. This is the breathing. And so this is our sound source, and now we can move to the granular and spectral part. So we have two different, let's say, granular engines. One is more, let's say, standard granular, and other is the spectral freeze. So let's listen first to the to the granular. We can define the positions by moving with our mouse on the X and Y axis. So let's now listen to the granular part. As you can hear, there are quite a few things going on. So these are randomized grains, which we can see moving here. And also these grains are spatially moving around. So we have a different panning for each grain. And this is just like the basic stuff that we usually have in granular synths. But what I couldn't find in other granular synths was that I can control each of these voices independently. And so if we move now to this lower section here, we can see that there are 16 voices here. And these 16 voices are basically these voices here represented. These colors correspond one to another. So the first one is a white one and so on. As you can see, we are controlling the pitch, which is specified here. And so we can control the pitch of each of these grain. So if we now maybe move to the next module, so this was the pitch. Now if we move to the volume module, we are basically now controlling the volumes of all our 16 grains. So if you go here, I have just to turn a bit on the effect. And we can now slowly move away all the voices. So, maybe an interesting use case and also a nice representation of what granular synthesis is in general. Maybe for someone who's not familiar with granular synthesis, we can take this example. So basically we have put all the voices down. All the 16 voices are now quiet. You can think of them also as singers. And if we now move back to the pitch, as we see now, all the pitches are flat, so they are all at the root of the scale, which in this case is C major. But we can transform the pitch for each voice, and you can see it here. So we are going to an F. You can also set a higher range. So here we have an octave above and beyond the root note. So if we move it up, now we have 24, so we have 2 octaves. So we can go really down with this first voice, and then I will just draw with an incremental pitch change. So it will go from a lower voice to a higher. You can again think of like a choir singing in different pitches that go from low to high. So now if we go back to the volumes, obviously we don't hear nothing now because all the volumes are down. But we can slowly move them up and we will get somehow a drawbar-like effect, but obviously with the content of this sample. So if you increase the first voice, you will see that as I increase the volume, the grain appears here. So it starts to move, so it's a nice visualization. Maybe if you put it a little larger, it's a nice visualization of what is happening. So now only one voice will play. And obviously it's quite low, so you won't hear it really well. But if you remember, we have going higher in pitch. So if we go into the center, we will get a more higher pitch coming out. As you can see here, this voice is represented here. If we move another, it gets slowly and slowly more evident. And obviously on the end there will be the most highest pitches. Let's say we can turn a little bit down, or maybe we can go to the filter and filter out the higher pitches a little bit. And so now we are playing these pitches all together, and obviously we can move on the waveform. And you can get some really interesting result by sequencing each voice independently. So now if we reset back the pitches to the center, we will now also listen to the Spectral Engine. So I will just go back to hear the normal granular, and now I will slowly add the spectral one. And I will turn down the granular. So as you can hear, this is more static, so it's like a spectral freeze. But what is interesting that we can still move around with it, and so we can move to different positions on the sample. These two types are really interesting because we can have different result basically on which kind of, let's say, granular synthesis we use. So we have this, which is more fluctuating, and this, which is really static. And when we combine both, we get some sort of new sound. But I would like to focus more on the Spectral Engine for now, and show you that we can again pitch it or transpose it. So we can put -12 and we get an octave down, or so again if we combine with the granular, we have these two new layers, and we can pitch it, we can detune it just a little bit, so we get a little offset of the, and then we get this fighting of both, which is also interesting, I think. But what is also interesting that we don't have just this pitch parameter, but since this is a spectral freeze and it's really static, it's also really useful for the synth engine, so we can play it polyphonically on our synth. And I will just go now to the synth model, and as you can see here, we can open different times of synthesis, and here we have opened the spectral part. So this is open, and again the color corresponds to this part. So now if we turn it down, and we can play it on our MIDI keyboard, but we can also have an internal keyboard. So I will just open that. And so now if we go to the root note and to the center of the keyboard, which is now the C3 root note, we can play that. So basically we will get the same sound as is here. There are some additional synth engines, but now we will only hear the spectral. Basically it's not transposing now, but we can transpose it, so we can go again third down or an octave down, and we can have this polyphonically, so we can create chords from it. And again, by combining this with we can get some really interesting results. But as you can see here, we can also add the granular, this typical granular, so this part we can add as another layer. So we can now add that one, and we have it both here. And we can now just listen to the more, let's say, moving part and to the spectral one. We can also mute them. And as I said, we can also add some other layers. So we can have also some different kind of synthesis that we can add on top. So if we combine the spectral, the granular, we can then add an FM bass sound. oscillator, another oscillator, or some noise. And obviously we can mix this with the source. Additionally, we can also play our sound source with an MP keyboard, which makes the whole expression even more interesting. So I will just show you a visualization of the MP so that you get an idea of what I'm actually playing on my MP keyboard. As you can hear, we are getting some artifacts, but again, we can then combine with the oscillators and get a more clearer sound. I think you get the idea. Then we also have an advanced matrix section where we can do a lot more things in terms of MPE, and we can control different parameters with it. Also on the granular part. So this can be really interesting, but it will take too much time to explain all, so we will skip it for now. Regarding to the spectral part, I would just like to show you one more thing which may be interesting how it's implemented. So as I said before, we have here the FM engine, and the cool thing is that besides the regular FM parameters, we can also morph. So I will just show you first the regular FM parameters, how they work. So this is like standard FM, but what is interesting that we can also blend in the sample parts. And here the spectral again works really well, for example as a modulator. So you will hear now how it's mixed between the carrier is the sinusoid, but the modulator is the spectral. So I will just play it on a keyboard. And so basically the FM is taking this sound as a modulator. Obviously the fun part is that we can also move around on our position and create different flavors of that FM. So I think you get the idea, and this gets even more fun with the next feature that I would like to show you, which is the gesture feature. I will demonstrate the gesture feature on the granular engines. So the main idea is that we can automate our movement immediately in a way. So we just turn on this hand, which is a symbol for the gesture feature, and now the system is waiting for us to press with the mouse or with the touch on the iPad, and as soon as we press, it will start record our movement. So we press, we move, and as soon as we release, it will automate our movement. So now I will release it, and it will automate it for me. So if we open the volume, so now we have this movement happening. We can also call it modulation, and we can move on and control something else. For example, I would like to add a little bit of the spectral component, but again, I can do it with a gesture. So if I turn on the gesture here, I just move up the volume, and I will control at the same time the volume and the pen of the spectral part. So now we are controlling the movement and the volume and the pen on the spectral part. And obviously, as soon as I press, a new gesture will be created. So if I press here, I will just make a slow decrescendo and crescendo. And as soon as I release it, it will start playing my gesture. And again, if I turn on the granular, so I will get more morphing between the spectral and the granular, I can again modulate the volume and the pen. And so by doing so, we get these constantly evolving textures that move in position of the waveform, and the volume and pen for in different directions, and movements for the granular part and the spectral part. Also here we have the speed parameter, so we can increase the modulation, and now it will be much faster, much slower, or much faster. So now it will be much slower. And we can also make like a really fast gesture. So we are creating some sort of gestural LFO. Additionally, we can stop one of them, such as the granular or the spectral. So let's say we can stop the spectral one, so you can hear that now it's fixed, while the granular one is still moving. So we can separate them in this way. So now just the spectral is moving, and we can have different speeds of them. We can make it slower now, the spectral, and the granular is gonna be much faster. Or we can make them both slower. And obviously we can then join with our synth and again make it move. And we can also automate the effects with the gesture. And here now we can return to the FM moment that we saw before, because now it's really interesting when we play the FM. So if it will be static, it will be like that. but with the gesture we can move the modulator now. And now it's gonna automatically play for us, and we can move on and work with the keyboard on the pitch. You get the idea there. And another feature that I really enjoy in Granularize is also that this concept of gesture is implemented in different parts. So again, as you can see here, we have a morph between all the oscillators. So we have 4 oscillators and we can morph between them. So if we turn them up, and I will... And again, we can morph between them. So now we have just the FM, the oscillator 1, the noise, and the oscillator 2. And here we have them all. But again, here we also have the gesture feature, so we can now turn it on and mix on the fly between these synthesis sounds. And as soon as I will release, it will play for me, so I can move on and... And by combining all of these options, you get really interesting results. And we haven't even been adding the original sound sources, such as the granular or the spectral. So again, if you add the spectral, I think you get the idea there. There is just one more maybe interesting concept that explains 2 more modules that are included in Granularize, and one is the windowing. That this is how the... Let me just stop for now the gesture and turn on the granular part. And so here we have different windowing for how these grains react. So a window is like a fade when the grain starts and when the grain ends. Without this fade, we will get a click, which is something that sometimes we want or don't want. We can also draw in our own shapes. So if we now put back, we get a nicer windowing. And then we have different types of windowing. So we have like a noisy one, like a half sinusoid dropping, and another one. And then we have cycles, which is like a tremolo effect. So you can have lower cycle, just 2, or you can have more, which will give like... Again, combining this with gestures can be really interesting. Additionally, we can draw our own windowing, so we can have just like little drops, which will create these little glitches. Or we can make a custom windowing. And this demonstrates one more feature that I would like to show you, and these are the preset section here in Granularize. So let's say that we build a little windowing here, let's say a glitchy one. And then we can store it, let's say that for our later use. And then we can make a more, and then let's just go back to this one and maybe just a little offset it. And this can be our second preset. And let's make something with the, and this can be our third preset. And we can make something like that, and that can be our fourth preset. And now we can recall them. So we have the first preset, the second one, third one, and the fourth one. So we can recall them manually, or we can use the sequencer, which is based here. So and so now it's moving in steps. It's like a step sequencer. So if we put it slower, we can change the note values here and the direction. We can have it random. And by doing so, we are creating somehow rhythmic structures out of our windowing, which is kind of interesting. But I would just like to show you one more feature in that regard, and this is the morphing feature. So the third tab here is we switch to the morph, and now we can morph between different shapes that we have stored. And obviously, since also here we have the gesture feature, we can do this automatically. So if we turn it on, we will just move, and as soon as I will release my mouse, it will move automatically for me. And this is something that I wasn't expecting that it will work, but actually you can do both. So you can morph, and at the same time you can also step sequence. So you will see a little blue dot and the morphing dot, and they will mix now because we are at the same time step recalling and morphing. And I was quite surprised that this actually worked, because basically there are two parameters that are now fighting against each other, which is really interesting, I think. So if we increase the step sequencing, it will jump more times, so we can get really these crazy textures. But it's interesting because as soon as we will, let's say, stop the morphing, it will go to a normal sequence. And this is, again, you know, music needs variation. If we keep repeating like this, can become quite boring. But if on top we put a little morph, then the texture gets much more complex. So if we return on the morphing, we get a more, let's say, it's still rhythmic but a more unstable texture, which is, I think it's interesting. And this is, I think, all for the morphing and gesture feature. For the end, I would just like to quickly show you our latest Max for Live device called Sequemperor.